I found out I had been sold before anyone bothered to ask if I was still human. The boardroom was all glass and steel and curated dominance. 47 floors above the city, sunlight bled through panoramic windows and fractured across a table polished so perfectly it reflected our faces back at us. Distorted, stretched, almost shuji. The emblem of our family's corporate pack was embedded in the center, a stylized wolf in a circle of chrome, teeth bared forever at nothing. It smelled like money, and burnt coffee, and tension. I sat 3 seats down from my father, tablet in front of me, stylus resting between my fingers out of habit more than need. My job was usually simple: listen, calculate, quietly keep the company from hemorrhaging through the invisible cracks no one else wanted to see. Across from me, my older brother Lucas leaned back in his chair, relaxed, expensive, bored. The air, the face, the one who smiled for investors and let me clean the mess underneath. My father cleared his throat. The room obeyed. "We'll begin," he said, voice calm, practiced, carrying the weight of a man who had never once had to ask permission in his own house. Today's agenda includes final approval of the restructuring initiative. Restructuring, the corporate euphemism for amputation. A woman from legal stood. Dark suit, neutral makeup, voice like a weather report. "Following negotiations," she said, "the board has agreed to transfer the analytics department, including its internal contracts and operational obligations, to Vale Strategic Holdings, effective immediately." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Analytics, my department. The room murmured, low, controlled. I felt nothing, then everything. Cold slid under my skin, as if someone had poured winter directly into my veins. My ears rang, a thin, high sound like feedback. If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting. Like a system error. The air pressed against my chest, heavy, as if the room had lost a few vital percentages of oxygen. The legal counsel tapped her tablet. A document appeared on the central screen. Appendix C, a list of transferred assets. Hardware, software, ongoing contracts. And then, Calder Nathaniel, head of analytics. My name, reduced to a line item. She continued speaking, unbothered. All department leadership will remain in position under the new ownership structure. New ownership. The numbers on the screen blurred, but not because of tears. Because something in them felt wrong. Off. Rotten. I'd always been good with data. Patterns. Flows. Structural integrity. But this wasn't analysis. This was sensation. A pressure behind my eyes. A faint, nauseating sense. Like the smell of something sweet left too long in heat. The numbers weren't just red. They were sick. The doors at the far end of the boardroom opened. Conversation died instantly. He walked in like he owned the concept of forward motion. Tall, precise, dark suit cut close to the body. No wasted lines. His presence shifted the room, an alpha's gravity bending attention whether it was wanted or not. His gaze moved once across the table, cataloging, assessing, and then stopped on me. The ringing in my ears sharpened. This was RYDER VALE, the man whose fund bought companies the way predators tested fences. He didn't smile. Not really. But one corner of his mouth tilted, almost curious. "So," he said, voice smooth, controlled, dangerous in the way still water is dangerous. "You're the head of analytics." No one answered. I realized too late he wasn't speaking to the room. He was speaking to me. He took another step closer to the table, eyes never leaving my face. "Then you're the one holding the spine." Something in my chest tightened at the word. Spine. Structure. Support. I looked at my father. He didn't look back. And in that polished reflection of glass and chrome, surrounded by people who spoke of me like furniture, the truth settled with brutal, undeniable clarity. They hadn't sold my department. They had sold me with the desks. My father's office had never smelled like him. It smelled like old leather, polished wood, and the kind of expensive alcohol no one actually drank, only poured when they wanted the room to remember who was in charge. Family portraits lined the walls in heavy frames, generations of Calders, alphas and betas, and a few carefully placed omegas, all posed in versions of the same power. Calm mouths, straight spines, eyes that never asked. He stood behind his desk when I walked in, not to greet me, to fortify himself. "Nate," he said. "Not son." The door sealed shut behind me with a quiet, final sound. I didn't sit. "You sold my department," I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't shake. It was thin, but clean. Like a blade. He folded his hands. The gesture he used when speaking to banks, to boards, to problems. I restructured the company. "You sold my people. I protected them. Vale keeps departments intact. Their packages are competitive. And me?" A pause. "Fractional. Calculated. You were included because you're integral to the unit." Integral. I let out a breath that almost laughed. "You put my name in an appendix." His jaw tightened. "Don't dramatize this." The word hit harder than I expected. He moved around the desk, poured himself a drink. The bottle made a low, pleasant sound. "The market is unstable. Investors are nervous. Creditors less patient than they were even a year ago. You're in debt," I said. He didn't deny it. Instead, he turned the glass slowly in his hand. "We all are, in one way or another. That's not an answer." His gaze sharpened. "It's the only one that matters." I stepped closer, close enough now to see the faint gray at his temples. The lines time had etched where certainty used to be. "How much?" For a moment I thought he wouldn't tell me. Then he reached behind him, opened a drawer, and slid a tablet across the desk. The number on the screen didn't register. Not at first. Then it did. And something in me went very still. It wasn't a hole. It was a canyon. A long, silent drop that rewrote gravity. "That's not market pressure," I said quietly. "That's collapse." His fingers tightened around the glass. "It's survival." "You didn't sell assets," I said. "You amputated the heart." His mouth twitched. Not quite a frown. "Departments don't have hearts." I looked at him. "They don't feel," he continued. "They don't get tired. They don't break." I swallowed. My chest felt wrong. Dense. Like something heavy had been set there without asking. "You always were strong," he added, almost gently. "You handled pressure well. You never complained. You fixed what needed fixing." There it was. Not apology. Assessment. Understanding slid into place with a sick, precise click. He hadn't betrayed me. He had traded me. A knock sounded at the door. An assistant entered, eyes down, carrying a slim black envelope with a silver insignia stamped on the front. Vale Strategic Holdings. She placed it on the desk between us and left without a word. The seal caught the light. My name was already printed on it, in a font that wasn't ours. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. I recognized my father's handwriting on the signature line visible through the translucent edge, and for the first time in my life, I understood exactly what it meant. He hadn't let me go. He had signed me over. Vale Strategic Holdings didn't believe in warmth. The lobby alone felt like a controlled environment, stone floors that swallowed sound, walls of smoked glass, lighting calibrated to eliminate shadow rather than create it. No banners, no slogans, no emblems of legacy or lineage, just a single, abstract metal structure suspended in the atrium, twisting upward like a frozen fracture. No history, only momentum. I stood there with a visitor badge clipped to my jacket, the word transfer printed beneath my name. Across the space, people moved with efficient silence. This wasn't a family pack. There were no informal clusters, no easy laughter, no one leaning on anyone else's space. They orbited invisible hierarchies, adjusting trajectories the way algorithms adjust to new data. A woman approached me first, mid-40s, crisp suit, sharp eyes that measured before they met yours. "I'm Mara Keene, Chief Financial Officer." She offered a handshake that was firm, brief, and already moving on. "Your department's preliminary integration has been mapped. We'll expect a 30-day optimization curve, not hope. Expect." Behind her came another figure, tall, pale hair pulled into a low knot, expression carved into professional neutrality. Elaine Rourke. Legal. Her gaze flicked to my badge. All legacy contracts will be reviewed. Any non-compliant obligations will be terminated. The way she said terminated made it clear she wasn't only referring to paperwork. Then someone stopped directly in front of me. Alpha. The air changed. Subtle. Chemical. My body registered it before my mind did. The faint prickle along my arms. The instinctive recalibration of space. He was broad-shouldered, golden-eyed, with the relaxed posture of someone who had never had to ask whether he belonged somewhere. Travis Holt, he said, not offering his hand. Trading division. His gaze moved over me openly, head to throat to hands. A catalog, not a look. So you're the package deal, he added. Didn't expect the spine of a failing corporation to look so portable. Mara shot him a warning glance. He ignored it. I run the numbers, I said evenly. Not the posturing. A slow smile pulled at his mouth. We'll see. They left me with a woman from operations who guided me through corridors of glass and muted light, past teams that didn't glance up, past screens alive with markets and models and controlled chaos. Everything here was modular, replaceable, designed to be reconfigured without emotional debris. We stopped in front of a door that recognized her print and mine. Mr. Vale will see you now. The office beyond was almost empty. A desk, a wall of data. The city framed like a living diagram. RYDER VALE stood by the window, hands loosely clasped behind his back. He turned as I entered. Close the door. I did. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I didn't take it. Your role remains head of analytics, he said. Your team will be retained. Performance will be evaluated on 3 axes: predictive accuracy, structural resilience, and profit conversion. Comforting, I said. I was worried you'd go for interpretive dance. A corner of his mouth curved. You'll have full access to our internal systems. Limited access to strategic archives. That expands with results. He met my eyes. Your department cost me a great deal of money. There it was. The price tag. I don't buy people, Ryder said calmly. I buy outcomes. Something sharp and bright moved in my chest. Then I replied, You're about to regret the receipt. For the first time, his smile reached his eyes, not warm, interested, and I realized, standing in a room designed to erase individuality, that whatever he thought he had acquired, he hadn't read the full inventory. The analytics center at Vale didn't sleep. It dimmed. Lights softened after midnight, screens shifting to darker palettes, the low hum of servers becoming the dominant sound, like distant surf, steady and indifferent. Most of the floor was empty by the time I stopped pretending I was tired. My team had gone home. The trading desks were ghosts behind glass. Only the system remained. And me. I stood in the middle of a semicircle of workstations, jacket draped over the back of a chair, sleeves rolled up, hands resting on cool metal. Data flowed across the central wall in layered projections, market movements, internal transfers, risk matrices, predictive arcs. At first, I worked the way I always had. Models, comparisons, pattern recognition. Then the pressure started. Not mental, physical. A faint compression behind my eyes, like someone pressing 2 fingers into my temples from the inside. My shoulders tightened. My breathing adjusted without instruction. The numbers on one sector of the wall blurred, not visually but sensationally. Wrong. I closed my eyes, and the sensation sharpened. There was a smell, not real, not chemical, but distinct in the way memory is distinct. A hollow, sterile absence, like air in a sealed room that had been empty too long. There, I opened my eyes and isolated the flow. A secondary liquidity loop tied to mid-tier portfolios. On paper, stable, balanced, harmless, but my body disagreed. The pressure behind my eyes deepened, pulsing faintly in rhythm with the data refresh. When I rerouted the projection, the sensation eased by a fraction. I didn't think. I followed. I traced flows the way some people trace melodies, not by logic but by resonance. When a structure aligned, my chest loosened. When it didn't, my skin prickled, my jaw clenched, a low tension settling along my spine. This wasn't analysis. This was navigation. I found inefficiencies no report had flagged, microfractures in strategy, places where assumptions had layered over rot. I restructured allocation pathways, redirected computational weight, tightened feedback loops. Each correction released a small, almost imperceptible relief in my body, like setting bones. By 2 a.m., the fund's internal dashboards were shifting. Volatility dampened. Forecast confidence climbed. Conversion ratios adjusted upward in clean, unmistakable increments. Vale systems were learning. And so was I. I leaned back, exhaling slowly, only then realizing how shallow my breathing had been. The pressure in my temples faded to a faint echo. The hollow smell receded. The system felt quieter, balanced. A soft sound came from behind me. Slow, unhurried, I turned. RYDER VALE stood near the edge of the floor, jacket off, sleeves buttoned, a tablet in his hand. I hadn't heard him enter. I wasn't sure how long he'd been there. "You're restructuring live flows," he said. "Yes. You weren't instructed to know a beat. The performance metrics just spiked, then your system was underperforming." His gaze moved, not over the screens, but over me, as if the data were secondary. "How did you isolate the fault lines so quickly?" he asked. I considered the wall of numbers. The quiet, the faint residual tension still humming in my nerves. "I listened," I said. "To what?" I hesitated. My body, that earned a subtle lift of his brow. He stepped closer, stopping just outside my space. Alpha presence pressed at the edges of awareness, not aggressive, but undeniably there. "Keep doing whatever you're doing," RYDER said, "and log every intervention." He turned to leave, then paused. "You didn't just optimize," he added. "You stabilized." The word struck deeper than it should have. As he walked away, the screens behind me pulsed with newly aligned systems. And for the first time since the boardroom, something inside me wasn't ringing. It was listening, and it was very, very awake. The conference room was suspended over the city like a glass thought. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around three sides, night pressing close, lights scattered below like broken circuitry. Inside, the table was a single slab of dark composite, seamless, reflecting the shifting glow of data projections drifting between us. It was just past midnight. RYDER stood at the far end, hands braced against the surface, studying a vertical display. I sat opposite him, tablet in hand, pulse still faintly aware of the systems I'd left running. "I traced the liquidity loop you flagged," he said. "It's clean." "On the surface," I replied. He glanced up. "Meaning?" I swiped, casting my findings into the air between us. A cascade of interlinked paths unfolded, elegant at first glance. Then I highlighted the buried vectors. Thin, red, persistent. "These microtransfers," I said. "They're not random. They're patterned to look like noise." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Noise from where?" I pulled one thread free and let it expand. The logo at its origin point was unmistakable. Calder Holdings. My old corporate crest glowed faintly between us like a bruise. For a moment, the room held its breath. "That's impossible," RYDER said. "No," I corrected. "It's inconvenient." He straightened. The air shifted. Not sharply, but the temperature of attention changed. "You're suggesting internal bleed-through between a newly acquired department and its former parent corporation." "I'm suggesting someone didn't cut the cord," I said. "Or they tied it in a way that benefits them." "You've been here less than a week." "Congratulations," I replied. "Your systems are already lying to you." That earned me a look. Direct. Measuring. Irritation sharpened by interest. "Your department was isolated before integration. On paper." I flicked another layer into view. "But financial architecture doesn't forget muscle memory. Old paths persist if no one knows they're there." "And you do?" he asked. I shrugged. "My temples do." A beat. Then, to my surprise, he huffed a quiet breath that might have been almost a laugh. "You're saying this with remarkable confidence for an asset still under evaluation." I smiled thinly. You're remarkably defensive for someone who doesn't take it personally. His jaw tightened. You were not brought here to audit my funds past. I wasn't brought here, I said. I was delivered. The word landed harder than I'd intended. His gaze sharpened. Alpha presence brushed my senses, restrained but present, like a warning line. Careful, Ryder said. You don't know where these threads lead. I know exactly where one of them starts, I replied, tapping the crest still hovering between us. And I know my old company's numbers, their margins, their patterns. This doesn't belong to you. Silence stretched. The city flickered behind him. Finally, Ryder moved, slowly, deliberately, around the table. He stopped beside the projection, studying the highlighted paths. You think someone left themselves a tunnel, he said. I think someone never stopped digging. His fingers flexed once at his side. And you believe this is active? Yes. Profitable? Not for you. Another pause. Then he looked at me fully. Dig, Ryder said. I lifted a brow. That's it? Deeper, broader, without filters. His mouth curved faintly. If my fund has a ghost connection to your family's corpse, I want its bones on my desk. And if it turns out to be nothing? His eyes held mine. Then you'll have learned something, he said. And so will I. I stood, gathering my tablet. Permission to speak freely? I asked. He gestured once. You should be more worried, I said. The structures I grew up in didn't leak by accident. Something like anticipation flickered in his expression. Then don't disappoint me, Ryder replied. As I walked out, the city's light followed me across the glass. And somewhere beneath the numbers, something old and familiar stirred. The restricted archive level was built to forget it existed. No windows. No external signal. No decorative surfaces. The walls were matte black composite, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Even sound felt dampened. Footsteps swallowed before they could echo. Every terminal was enclosed, every data line layered behind security protocols that didn't announce themselves. They simply waited. Ryder had cleared us both personally. The door sealed behind us with a soft hydraulic hush. Everything you see here, he said, is information my fund paid to make sure someone else never could. Rows of secured stations stretched into dimness. Cold, ordered, almost reverent. I moved to the nearest terminal, logged in with the access he'd granted me. The system responded instantly, unfolding a constellation of internal analyses, acquisition projections, corporate dissections. One folder was already open. Calder Holdings. Core Structure Assessment. I didn't touch it. Ryder did. You want to know why I was willing to absorb a family corporation with debt patterns like yours? He said. It wasn't for the assets. Not even for the market share. He expanded the file. Inside were years of diagrams. Flow maps. Influence networks. Predictive behavior modeling tied not to departments, but to decision signatures. At the center of every model was a node labeled Subject, L. Calder. Lucas. My brother. Your company had an anomaly, Ryder continued. Someone who consistently corrected systemic failures before they escalated. Someone whose interventions stabilized structures that should have collapsed. He gestured at the projections. Every external consultancy we hired pointed to your brother. The visible one. The heir. The alpha face of the enterprise. I leaned closer. The charts told a different story. Whenever Lucas initiated a project, volatility increased. Whenever he signed off on expansions, debt curvature bent wrong. But after each destabilization, there it was. A secondary correction pattern. Quiet, efficient, relentless. My corrections. Ryder flicked to another view. Time-lapse overlays. Cause and effect chains. Financial telemetry mapped against internal authorization trails. The stabilizing inputs didn't originate from the executive floor. They originated from analytics. From my console. From timestamps that coincided with nights I barely remembered. You weren't the visible heir, Ryder said. But every model showed an unseen one. My mouth felt dry. You were the one preventing total failure, he continued. So I authorized acquisition targeting the structural core. He looked at me then. Your department was the decoy, he said. The spine was always supposed to be your brother. He let the projections rotate once more before closing them. They were wrong. I stared at the now dark screen. Wrong. A quiet laugh escaped me before I could stop it. It didn't sound amused. You're telling me you bought the wrong Calder? Ryder's gaze didn't waver. No, he said. I'm telling you, I bought the right one by accident. The air felt different. Thicker. Charged. You weren't a department, he said slowly. You were the infrastructure. The word hit harder than spine had. Infrastructure wasn't visible. It wasn't praised. It was assumed. Something inside my chest shifted. Not relief, not pain, but a reorientation, like a system discovering a new axis. Ryder studied me. Something recalculating behind his eyes. For the record, he added, if I'd known that from the start, the negotiation would have looked very different. Cheaper? I asked. A corner of his mouth lifted. More honest. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was reconsidering. And for the first time since the boardroom, I realized RYDER VALE was no longer looking at an asset. He was looking at a mistake. And wondering what to do with it. The secure server level was colder than the archive. Not in temperature. Vale regulated everything. But in atmosphere. This place wasn't meant for people. It was meant for machines and the secrets they never forgot. The corridor lights were low and narrow, strip white and surgical, reflecting off sealed data columns that pulsed faintly like restrained heartbeats. Ryder had given me full legacy access, not to the fund, to my family's corpse. I keyed into the terminal he'd opened for me and pulled the oldest preserved logs from Calder Holdings. The system warned me twice, then it yielded. The first data sets were familiar. Historical cash flows, archived performance sheets, structural evolutions I'd helped build myself. Nothing felt wrong. Then I scrolled back another year, and another, and the pressure began. It started behind my eyes, a deep internal tension like a muscle trying to tear its way free. My jaw clenched without permission. The faint hollow smell returned. Not rot this time, but something sharper. Metallic, like exposed wiring. I isolated outlier transactions. There were hundreds, no, thousands. Individually negligible, collectively. A drain. They were threaded through shell initiatives, micro-projects buried inside legitimate expansion proposals. Each one carried a plausible objective. Each one closed cleanly. Each one had been approved. The same signature repeated through the authorization chains. L. Calder, Lucas. My fingers hovered over the interface. No, I murmured. I mapped the transactions. The system unfolded the structure like a living thing. Flow after flow bent outward, siphoned through layered subsidiaries, folded into offshore vehicles designed to look like cost centers. The pattern wasn't chaotic. It was elegant. And it was hungry. The pressure in my skull spiked, sharp enough to make me suck in a breath. My vision dimmed at the edges. The numbers weren't just wrong anymore. They were screaming. Every false project I'd once optimized lit up in memory. Every late night spent correcting inefficiencies. Every time I'd rerouted capital to stabilize what I thought were external shocks. They weren't shocks. They were wounds. And I had been stitching them closed. I pulled historical performance overlays, aligning Lucas's high-visibility ventures with internal corrective actions. There I was, always after, always compensating. I hadn't been fixing a failing company. I had been plugging my brother's siphon. The realization hit with physical force. My palm flattened against the cold surface of the terminal as nausea rose, sharp and unwelcome. My temples throbbed, pulse pounding too loudly in my ears. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Fake research branches, phantom market tests, development arms that existed only long enough to justify internal drains. Each one signed, approved, celebrated, and every time the system would have collapsed. If I hadn't been there, if I hadn't felt the wrongness and chased it, if I hadn't believed it was my responsibility to keep the structure breathing, a bitter sound left my throat. God, I whispered, you built a maze, and I had spent years mapping it. The pain sharpened suddenly, hot behind my eyes, down the back of my neck. I had to step away from the console, breathing slow, controlled, until the room stopped tilting. The data hung in the air between the server columns, glowing like a confession. Lucas hadn't mismanaged the company. He had been feeding on it. And my father... The thought stalled, unfinished, heavy. I shut down the projection with a trembling hand. The pressure didn't leave. It sat behind my eyes like a bruise. A reminder. My brother's ghost wasn't in the boardroom. It was in every number I'd ever touched. And it had been using me as its exorcist, without my consent, without my knowledge. For years, the house had never sounded so hollow. I hadn't been back since the acquisition, since the sale, since the moment the word family had turned into a contractual category. But the security system still recognized my biometrics. The doors still parted for me as if nothing had changed. Inside, everything smelled like polish and memory. The main hall lights activated automatically, spilling pale gold across stone floors and the long wall of portraits. Generations of Calders watched me pass. Formal, composed, immortalized in moments when they believed the structure beneath them would never crack. My father stood in the study at the back of the house, exactly where I'd expected him to be. The room was dim except for a desk lamp and the city's distant glow through tall windows. He was looking at something on his tablet when I entered. He didn't startle. He had been waiting. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I don't live here anymore," I replied. "You made sure of that?" He set the tablet aside. "You're agitated." I almost laughed. "Did you know?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. "About Lucas," I clarified. "About the siphons, the shell projects, the drains I spent years sealing." The silence stretched. Then very quietly he said, "Yes." The word landed heavier than any shout could have. I took a step forward, then another. "How long?" "Long enough." My chest tightened. "And you let me keep fixing it. You were effective." The word cut. "He's been bleeding the company," I said. "Stealing from it. He's been preparing it." "For what?" My voice cracked, despite my effort. "For leadership," my father said. "For autonomy. For a future where Calder Holdings isn't dependent on external stabilizers." I stared at him. "You mean me?" "You were a stabilizer," he said, as if explaining a market mechanism. "Lucas is a builder. Builders break things. Stabilizers prevent collapse." I felt something inside me give way. "So you chose him," I said. "Again. He is the heir. And what am I?" He hesitated. "Not long. Reliable." The word broke something old and structural in my chest, a support beam I hadn't known I was still standing on. "I found the debt," I said. "The real one. The canyon you hid behind market talk. You sold my department because he'd finally drained you dry." My father's mouth tightened. "I sold what I could to protect what mattered." "Not who," I said. "What?" He looked at me then. Really looked. "You've always been strong, Nathaniel. You adapt. You absorb pressure. You survive." "Yes," I said. "So you used me. I relied on you. To make his crimes invisible." He didn't deny it. The room felt smaller, the air denser. "When Vale came," he continued, "it was an opportunity. A controlled loss. Your department intact. You placed somewhere powerful. Lucas protected. The company given time. You traded me," I said, "to keep your favorite project breathing." He winced. "Barely. You're not fragile," he said. "This won't destroy you." Something in my throat burned. "No," I said, "but it explains you." He opened his mouth, perhaps to say my name. I didn't give him the space. "All those nights I came home exhausted," I said. "All the times you said you were proud, that I was helping, that I mattered." My voice lowered. "You were thanking the tourniquet." His shoulders sagged a fraction. "I did what I had to." "And you lost what you had," I replied. I turned away before he could respond. The portraits watched as I walked out. For the first time, they didn't look like ancestors. They looked like witnesses. And my childhood finally collapsed under the weight of its own truth. The roof of Vale Strategic was designed to impress. Clean lines, glass barriers, a skyline that wrapped around the building like an illuminated circuit. The wind-up here was constant, precise, calibrated by altitude and architecture, tugging lightly at my sleeves as if checking whether I was real. I had come up alone. No security, no tablet, no numbers, just air and height and the faint, persistent echo of what I'd learned. The city moved below me, alive in ways corporate diagrams never captured. Headlights threaded streets like living arteries. Buildings pulsed with private light. Somewhere, far beneath the hum of traffic, people were laughing, eating, choosing things. I leaned against the railing and closed my eyes. The pressure behind my eyes was still there, fainter now, but present. A reminder that my body no longer belonged only to me. It belonged to structures, to flows, to the invisible tensions that shaped systems from the inside. All my life, I had followed that pressure, not because anyone told me to, because it hurt not to. When numbers screamed, I answered. When systems buckled, I braced them. When something in the architecture felt wrong, I corrected it before anyone else had to notice. I had called it responsibility, maturity, strength. But standing there, with the city breathing beneath me and no projection screens between me and the truth, a different word surfaced. Fear, not of failure, of collapse. I had been terrified of what would happen if I didn't hold the structure together, of who would fall, of who I would be blamed for not saving. So I had become the quiet solution, the invisible hand. The reason disasters became inconveniences. I let out a slow breath. I was the heart, I murmured to the wind, not the leak. He hadn't bled the company alone, but he hadn't kept it alive either. I had, and hearts weren't meant to be used as spare parts. The realization didn't feel triumphant. It felt clarifying. The pressure behind my eyes shifted, not easing, not intensifying, but reorganizing, as if something in me had been waiting for permission to recalibrate. I straightened, resting my palms on the cool glass. I could keep stabilizing broken structures, follow old currents, be the thing people relied on without ever having to see. Or I could stop, let old systems feel what they were owed, and choose where my attention went, where my body went, where my strange, inconvenient gift was spent. The city didn't care. It would continue, with or without my quiet corrections. But for the first time I realized I didn't have to continue the way I always had. Not for my father, not for my brother, not even for RYDER VALE. The wind tugged at my hair, cool and insistent. I opened my eyes, and somewhere inside the architecture of me, a new parameter appeared. Not efficiency, not necessity, choice. And with it, the first real question I'd asked myself in years. What do I want to build, if I'm not fixing what others broke? The strategic chamber was a place RYDER rarely used. No windows, no ambient city. Just a circular room carved from dark composite, the air faintly cool, the lighting indirect and focused inward. The central table was inactive when I entered, its surface matte and empty like a held breath. RYDER stood near the far wall, reviewing something on a handheld display. He looked up as the doors sealed behind me. "You asked for a closed session," he said. "That usually means either very good news or very expensive problems." I set my tablet on the table. "Both," I replied. With a two-finger tap, I activated the projection. The room filled with architecture. Not buildings, systems. Layers of financial structure unfolded in three-dimensional relief. Calder Holdings' historical flows braided with Vale's recent acquisitions. Micro-transfers glowing like capillaries. I overlaid time, then authorization trails, then shell pathways. The room grew crowded with truth. RYDER's gaze sharpened. He moved closer, slow, deliberate, studying the map from multiple angles. As he walked, he peeled off his jacket and draped it over the back of a chair without looking. "This," I said, isolating a lattice of pale red vectors, "is the siphon network. It's been active for years. It never showed up because it wasn't stealing loudly. It was bleeding quietly." I expanded the structures, revealing the nested project frameworks, false development arms, phantom initiatives, each one engineered to justify internal drains. The capital didn't vanish. It was redistributed into off-books holdings, designed to feed back through strategic investments. Ryder exhaled slowly. They were building a shadow fund, he said. Yes, I replied. Using a family corporation as a laundering engine. And you've traced ownership? I highlighted the authorization spine. L. Calder. Primary. Secondary. Tertiary. The system flared, confirming continuity. Ryder's jaw tightened. Your brother built this, he said. My brother fed it, I corrected. My father protected it. And I paused. I kept the host alive. The projections shifted as I activated the final layer. Exposure vectors, regulatory choke points, public leverage nodes, everything a predator needed to know where the bones were thin. Ryder went very still. This wasn't irritation. This was appreciation. Why bring this to me? He asked. Because you bought into it, I said. And because you're very good at tearing down structures that pretend to be healthy. A corner of his mouth lifted. Flattery? Strategic, I replied. I don't want this fixed. I want it ended. He turned then, fully facing me. You're asking me to attack your family's corporate body. I'm asking you to stop it from feeding, I said. There's a difference. Silence settled. Dense. Charged. Ryder studied me as if I were a new variable, introduced into a stable equation. You realize, he said slowly, that if I move on this, Calder Holdings doesn't survive. I met his gaze. It already didn't. The table hummed faintly as the projections rotated. Why now? He asked. Why not quietly step away and let it collapse on its own? I didn't answer immediately, because the answer wasn't tactical. Because, I said finally, I'm tired of being the thing that keeps it breathing. Something unreadable crossed his expression. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not cold, not sharp, interested. You don't bring me a map like this unless you want to watch the hunt, he said. I don't want to watch, I replied. I want to aim. He stepped closer, stopping just within my space. Alpha presence brushed the edge of my senses. Not a push, not a threat, an assessment. You're not just giving me targets, Ryder said. You're offering yourself as the lens. I know where it hurts, I said, and where it lies. His gaze dropped briefly to the projection between us, then returned to my face. Then he said quietly, we do this together. A beat, not an order. An offer. On one condition, I added. He tilted his head. I don't work for you, I said. I work with you. His smile curved, slow and deliberate. Careful, Nate, Ryder said. That almost sounds like a partnership. Almost, I replied. The projections continued to glow between us, and for the first time since the boardroom, I wasn't showing someone what I could fix. I was showing him where to strike. The trading floor had never been that loud. Not in sound, Vale still enforced its low-noise discipline, but in motion. Screens flared across curved walls, layers of data colliding, market feeds updating faster than the eye could comfortably track. Analysts moved between stations with sharp, economical steps. Traders stood, sat, stood again. Conversations fractured into clipped phrases, hand signals, urgent murmurs. The room didn't buzz. It vibrated. I stood at the elevated operations platform beside Ryder, a clear pane of smart glass between us and the floor. The city was still dark outside, early morning barely tinting the horizon. On the central wall, Calder Holdings' ticker scrolled in steady green. For now, all channels ready, Marakeen said through the open comm. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Regulatory packets queued. Media drops synchronized. Elaine Rourke appeared on a side display. Legal pathways cleared. Once the first disclosures go public, injunctions will follow within minutes. I nodded once. The pressure behind my eyes had been building since dawn. Not sharp, not painful, expectant. Execute, Ryder said. The first release went live. A cascade of internal documents flooded secure regulatory networks, transaction logs, shell mappings, authorization trails, not accusation. Proof. Within 30 seconds, The financial news feeds spiked. A minute later, social channels detonated. Calder Holdings under investigation. Massive internal siphoning revealed. Executives implicated in long-term financial misconduct. On the wall, Calder's stock line shuddered, then dipped, then dropped. Trading volume surged like a breached artery. My pulse didn't. A second wave followed, this one public. Curated data packages delivered to every major financial outlet. Names, dates, flows. A story so thoroughly scaffolded it didn't need a narrator. The trading floor adjusted. Orders rerouted. Positions closed. Vale systems absorbed the turbulence like a living thing. On a side display, a live feed from a courthouse in the financial district came online. Security footage. My brother, Lucas, stepping out of a black car, expression composed, flanked by legal counsel. Then hands touched his arms. Not violently, procedurally. Cameras surged. Voices rose. Someone shouted his name. He turned, and for one brief, unfiltered second, his face wasn't the heir's. It was a man who had miscalculated the cost of being unseen. Federal warrants confirmed, Elaine said. Asset freezes in progress. International subsidiaries flagged. On the central wall, Calder's ticker plunged. Red replaced green. The room exhaled as one organism. Ryder's gaze never left the displays. There it is, he murmured. Systemic hemorrhage. I watched the numbers, watched structures I had spent years bracing finally register the absence of my hands. They didn't collapse gently. They collapsed honestly. Media feeds multiplied. Commentators speculated. Analysts dissected. The Calder name scrolled beneath words like investigation and fraud and corporate rot. My brother was escorted through courthouse doors. My father's name appeared in connection, then in context, then in proximity to words that stripped it of its old immunity. I waited for something to tear, for grief, for vindication, for the sharp, animal relief of retaliation. It didn't come. What came was space, a hollowing, not loss. Release. The pressure behind my eyes eased, slowly, like a storm system moving offshore. The faint ache that had lived there for years retreated, leaving behind a strange, quiet clarity. They're done, Mara said. Ryder finally turned his head, studying me rather than the screens. Do you feel it? He asked. I searched myself. There was no satisfaction, no triumph, no pain. I don't feel the leak anymore, I said. Outside the glass, the market continued its convulsions. Vale's traders rode the volatility with practiced precision. The world adjusted. Inside me, something fundamental went silent. And in that silence, for the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was standing in the aftermath, empty-handed, and entirely my own. My father's office looked smaller without the company behind it. The same leather, the same polished wood, the same portraits, now quietly irrelevant. But the screens on his walls were dark, and the faint hum of corporate life that used to permeate the room was gone. He was standing when I entered, older, not in years, in posture. They've frozen the holding accounts, he said. Our personal assets are under review. The board is in emergency session. I didn't sit. That was inevitable. He studied my face. You orchestrated this. I exposed it. You weaponized Vale. I gave them the truth. A sharp exhale. You destroyed what I built. No, I said. I stopped what you protected. He looked away briefly, then back. You don't understand what you've done. I understand exactly what I stopped doing. He moved around the desk, placing his hands on its surface as if steadying himself. Nathaniel, he said. The full name. A reach for gravity. You're still a Calder. This will pass. The brand can be salvaged. We can reposition. You have leverage now. Vale values you. You can negotiate. For you, I said. For us. There is no us, I replied quietly. Brow furrowed. You're emotional. I almost smiled. You didn't call me that when I was keeping your empire upright. He hesitated. We can rebuild. You can come back as an external partner, a consultant. We'll formalize your role, protect your stake. He was offering me structure, contracts, boundaries, a way back into the machine. You're still trying to buy me, I said. This is how the world works. This is how your world worked. I stepped closer, close enough now to see the tremor in his hand, the strain in his jaw. You told me departments don't feel, I said. That they don't break, that they don't matter. My voice lowered. I am not a department. He opened his mouth. I didn't let him fill the space. And I am not on the invoice. Something in his expression shifted. Not anger, loss. He straightened slowly. If you walk away from this name, you walk away from everything it protected. I walk away from everything it cost. I turned. He didn't follow. Ryder's office was lit when I arrived. City lights washed the glass in pale color, outlining his silhouette against the windows. He was standing near his desk, hands in his pockets. They're finished, he said. The market will spend months digesting what you uncovered. I'm done digesting it. He studied me. Your work today added measurable value to this fund. There it was. The language he trusted. You changed the position of 3 markets, he continued, and removed a predatory structure that had been distorting regional capital for years. I didn't do it for your portfolio. I know. He paused. That doesn't change its worth. I felt the familiar tightening, the subtle reflex to be assessed, categorized, priced. I'm not interested in being valuable, I said. His gaze sharpened. Everyone is. Then this is where we differ. I stepped back. Ryder's voice lowered. You could leverage what you've become here. I didn't become anything here, I replied. I stopped being something elsewhere. Silence settled. He took a step forward. Nate. I need space, I said. From structures, from numbers, from people who only speak in transactions. I reached for the door. Behind me, he said quietly, You're not an entry on any ledger I own. I didn't turn back. Good, I said, and I left before either of us could turn that into an offer. The cafe didn't know who I was. That was its greatest virtue. No security gates, no glass towers, no hushed corporate choreography, just warm light, the low murmur of conversation, the scent of roasted beans and sugar, and something faintly citrus. People sat too close to each other, laughed too loudly, argued over pastries like it mattered. I had been there almost an hour, doing nothing more productive than letting the noise exist. The door opened. I didn't need to look up to know it was him. The air didn't shift the way it did in boardrooms. There was no territorial pressure, no silent clearing of space. He waited in line, paid, took the paper cup the barista offered him with a murmured thanks that sounded strange in his mouth. Only then did he approach my table. RYDER VALE, alpha, predator of failing corporations, carrying coffee, no security? I asked, glancing around. None, he said. No legal, no assistants, no drivers. I gestured to the empty chair. Bold, necessary. He sat. Up close, without glass or distance, he looked less like a structure and more like a man who had learned to become one. The sharpness was still there, the control, but there was something unguarded in the way he held the cup, the way his shoulders weren't braced for confrontation. I didn't come to negotiate, he said. That's good, I replied. I'm off the market. A faint curve touched his mouth. I came to ask for your time, a beat, your opinion, your interest. I studied him. You don't ask. I do when buying would be dishonest. That caught. He set the cup down. Vale Strategic will move forward without Calder Holdings in its shadow. The market correction is already underway. New voids will appear. New structures will be built. And I don't want to build them alone. I waited. You said you weren't interested in being valuable, Ryder continued. But you are interested in being precise, intentional. You don't just stabilize systems. You redesign them. Sometimes, I'm offering you a choice, he said. Not a role. The word resonated. Choice. What kind? I asked. Partner, he said simply. No papers. No figures. No projected ROI floating between us. I don't mean equity shares and board seats, he added. Those are tools. I mean co-architect. Someone who decides what gets built before money ever touches it. I exhaled slowly. That's not how your world works. No, he agreed. That's why I'm here, instead of in my office. A woman laughed somewhere behind him. A spoon clinked against porcelain. Life continued, stubborn and indifferent to corporate realignments. What do you want? He asked. The question wasn't strategic. It wasn't rhetorical. It was quiet. I thought of the roof, the silence after the collapse, the space where pressure used to live. I want to build something that doesn't make my body hurt, I said. He didn't smile. He nodded. Then, Ryder said, we start there. We sat in the middle of a cafe that didn't care who we were. And for the first time since he'd walked into my boardroom like a purchase order in human form, he wasn't offering me a structure. He was offering me a seat beside him. Empty, waiting to be defined. The new office didn't look like power. It looked like potential. Sunlight reached the floor. Real sunlight, not filtered through 40 layers of tinted glass and ambition. The space was still unfinished, exposed concrete in places, cables waiting in neat coils, half-assembled workstations, temporary tables borrowed from somewhere that didn't ask questions. There was a plant near the entrance. It was dying. Someone had overwatered it. I made a note to fix that. Tell me again why we didn't take the top 3 floors of the Helix Tower, Mara asked, standing in the middle of the room, with a tablet in one hand and a coffee in the other. Because I like being able to open a window, I said. And because, Ryder added calmly from behind her, Nate threatened. To walk if I chose another building that smelled like a mausoleum. Mara arched a brow at me. You're becoming expensive. Emotionally, I replied. Not financially. That's worse. Elaine Rourke passed behind us, surveying a temporary glass-walled meeting room, where 2 new analysts were arguing over a whiteboard full of half-formed models. She paused only long enough to say, Your onboarding process is chaos. Organic chaos, I corrected. She gave me a look. That's not a legal term. It will be. People moved through the space with the uncertain energy of something being born. There was laughter near the far wall. Travis Holt, to my deep and recurring displeasure, had been convinced to consult on the condition that he was allowed to argue with everyone. Someone had brought pastries. Someone else had eaten all the chocolate ones and was now under mild but organized attack. This was not a fund. This was not a corporation. This was a beginning. I stood at the central console we'd built into the floor, projecting the skeletal architecture of the systems we were designing. No hidden loops. No silent drains. No structures that required one person to bleed to keep them standing. Feedback pathways were visible. Stress points designed to announce themselves. Failure modeled as information, not shame. Walk me through it again, Ryder said, stepping to my side. I did. Not in metrics, in sensations. This is where it breathes, I said, highlighting a dynamic adaptive layer. It contracts under strain. It redistributes instead of rupturing. No dead ends, no blind corridors. And this? He asked, indicating a node near the center. That's where people touch it, I said. Not inputs. Interfaces. Choice points. He was quiet for a moment. You're building a system that doesn't need you to survive, he said. Yes, that's new for you. I glanced at him. It's new for me. He studied the projection, then looked around the room, the people, the noise, the half-built future. It's alive, he said. I felt it too. Not pressure, presence. The system responded when someone changed something. It didn't fight. It didn't hide. It adjusted. My temples were quiet. My chest was light. For the first time, I wasn't reinforcing an existing skeleton. I was designing something that could grow its own. And when Ryder met my eyes, there was no contract in the space between us. Just a shared architecture, still forming, still open, breathing. Time didn't fix everything, but it recontextualized it. The city outside our windows had shifted seasons. Light lingered differently in the evenings now. Warmer, slower. The office behind me was quieter than usual. Not empty. Just settled. People had gone home. Systems were running on night cycles. Somewhere down the hall, a machine hummed softly, like it was keeping watch. I stood at the glass, coffee cooling in my hand. I didn't need to close my eyes to feel the system anymore. It was there, not as pressure, not as urgency, as tone. A low, steady coherence. A sense of things moving where they were meant to move. Of stress being absorbed and answered. Of growth not requiring sacrifice. It didn't smell wrong. It didn't ache. It didn't ask me to disappear inside it. Behind me, footsteps approached. Ryder stopped at my side without announcing himself, offering his presence the way he'd learned to, without occupation. They approved the new integration model, he said quietly. The partners loved the transparency layer. Shocking, I replied. People enjoy knowing where their blood is going. A corner of his mouth lifted. We stood like that, watching the city rearrange itself into night. You don't brace anymore, he said after a moment. I considered it. No, I said. I don't. What do you feel? I searched for the word. Circulation. He nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Ryder had changed too. Not softened, reoriented. He still saw structures, still understood power, still knew how to tear things down. But now he asked what they were for before deciding how they should work. He didn't own this place. Neither did I. We chose it, together. Do you ever miss it? He asked. The old system, the certainty. I thought of glass boardrooms, of signatures, of invisible wounds I'd stitched without knowing who kept cutting them open. No, I said. I miss who I thought I had to be. He was quiet. Then, I'm glad you aren't him. So am I. The system shifted gently around us as a background process completed. Lights dimming by degrees, energy redistributing through pathways I had built to notice, to adapt, to breathe. Ryder reached out, not touching me, but close enough that the space between us felt intentional, and standing there, inside a structure that no longer required my disappearance to exist, I understood something with a clarity no number had ever given me. I was not an asset. I was not a stabilizer. I was not a spine someone else leaned on. I was an architect, and this living, responsive, quietly breathing world we had made was the only structure I had ever truly chosen. And for the first time in my life, it let me be free inside it.